What if the voice that saves your life doesn't come from a doctor, but from a barefoot orphan who wandered into your hospital room by accident? What if the child everyone discarded turned out to be the only one who could pull a billionaire back from death's edge, not with medicine, not with machines, but with a single trembling song? This isn't a fairy tale. This happened. And the truth behind it will make you question everything you thought you knew about family, fate, and the quiet power of kindness. Stay with us, because the girl you're about to meet didn't just sing. She changed a legacy, shattered a lie, and taught us what it really means to be chosen. It began in the kind of silence that can only exist at the edge of life, in a hospital wing where even hope dared not speak too loud. The air was heavy with antiseptic and resignation. In the room where a titan lay tethered to machines, fading away beneath the weight of grief, a whisper rose, not from a nurse, not from a doctor, but from the lips of a child who had no business being there. But that child had something no one else did, a voice that remembered joy in a world that had forgotten it. His name was Gregory Solarin, a tech mogul turned recluse, once a lion of industry who had roared across headlines and boardrooms. Now, the man was barely more than a shadow slumped beneath white sheets. After losing his wife and daughter in a fireball of twisted metal 2 years ago, Gregory gave up the will to exist. His bank account stayed full, his calendar stayed empty. He refused food, refused visitors, and refused most of all life. But that morning, something shifted. And that something was named Amara. She was 10, barefoot, gaunt, wrapped in a tattered gray dress that still clung to the memory of Lagos dust and long-forgotten rain. Her hair, wild and knotted, framed a face too small for the storms it had endured. And yet her eyes, deep, alert, unapologetically human, carried the echoes of a world far gentler than the one she walked through. You might wonder how a girl like her ended up in a private hospital wing meant for billionaires and whispered death sentences. The answer is hunger. The kind that claws at your belly, but also eats at your dignity. She had come to beg for bread, for kindness, for anything warm. But as she reached the marble lobby, a fragment of a hushed conversation floated into her ears. "He won't make it through the day," said a woman's voice. "He's stopped fighting," another added. And Amara did something extraordinary. She asked to help. Not with medicine, not with money, but with song. And it was laughter, not applause, that met her offer. One nurse chuckled. A male intern shook his head, already dismissing the dusty intruder. But the female doctor looked closer, past the grime and into something unshaken behind those brown eyes. "It won't hurt to try," she said. And so, a child who had never known a home without leaks or hunger was led into the cleanest room she'd ever seen. What happened next can't be fully measured in heart rate monitors or medical charts. Amara closed her eyes, placed her hand gently on the cold metal bar of the bed, and began to sing. And her voice, it wasn't grand, wasn't theatrical. It was a trembling thread of something ancient and gentle. It was the sound of sunrise on a broken day. Her lyrics, simple, but the emotion behind them felt forged in the furnace of every pain she'd ever endured and overcome. Her voice filled the air like incense in a chapel, curling through the room, brushing against Gregory's withering soul. And then his finger moved, not by reflex, not by accident. He twitched. A nurse gasped, The heart monitor steadied. The doctor stepped forward, wide-eyed. Then Gregory coughed. Slowly, his eyes peeled open. After weeks of silence and surrender, his gaze fell not on machines or walls, but on a barefoot girl who sang like heaven, wept through her. And for the first time in 2 years, he cried, not from loss, but from recognition. Something had reached him, not science, not wealth, a song. And the world would never be the same. Amara didn't know it then, but that song sung barefoot in a room that smelled like dying would set off a series of events that would challenge bloodlines, legacies, and the very idea of who deserves to be saved. But to understand what truly happened, we need to return 3 days earlier, to where her story hadn't yet collided with Gregory's, but was already soaked in tragedy and grit. Lagos isn't gentle, especially not to those who don't have names on title deeds or parents to speak for them. In the humid maze of Oyingbo Market, where shouts and honking mix into a kind of symphony of survival, Amara balanced a sack of tomatoes on her tiny head, no shoes, no lunch, just sweat and instinct. She had learned early to dodge puddles and insults. The vendors never remembered her name, but they remembered her silence. Amara didn't beg loudly. She didn't whine. She moved like someone who had already heard every no in the world and decided to carry on anyway. Her parents, Kelechi and Adeza, had once called her their nightingale. But that was before the accident. The kind of accident that leaves twisted wreckage behind and questions no one wants to answer. The police said it was a miracle she survived. Her relatives didn't think so. Her aunt Ajeoma, wrapped in bold colors and sharper words, took one look at her at the funeral and said, "It's not natural, that kind of crash." And she didn't bleed. And with that, love vanished. Overnight, no one took her in. No one held her hand. The only legacy Amara inherited was suspicion. So she slipped into the cracks of the city, unseen and unclaimed. She lived under a concrete bridge alongside others who were just as forgotten. At night, while others curled into sleep or sobbed softly, Amara sang. Not because it changed her circumstances, but because it reminded her she was still human. And sometimes, just sometimes, strangers would stop, cry, drop a few notes into her lap and walk away without a word. One woman once said, "Your voice feels like home I never had." Amara clung to that memory like a blanket. In one dream, she didn't know whether it was memory or fantasy. She stood beside a dying man. She sang. He opened his eyes, touched her hair and said, "You are more powerful than you think." It was only a dream. Until it wasn't. That Wednesday morning, she hadn't eaten. She had wandered toward August Modern Hospital, drawn not by logic, but a quiet pull in her chest. She thought maybe someone would pity her, give her change. Instead, she overheard fate. A dying man, no will to live. Depression deeper than any. Tumor. His name wasn't spoken aloud, but Amara didn't need it. Something inside her knew. She didn't hesitate. She told the staff, "I can help." They didn't believe her. Why would they? She didn't have shoes, let alone a degree. But still, she was led down that hallway, past the stairs, past the glass walls and marble floors, into the orbit of a man the world had already buried in spirit. Gregory Solarin, worth over $800 million at last count. but utterly bankrupt in will. Since the deaths of his wife, Elsie, and daughter, Asia, he had shrunk into a shell of a man. The world had tried to reach him with therapy, pills, priests. Nothing worked. He'd asked for his will. He was done. Until a child touched the metal bar beside his bed, closed her eyes, and poured out a voice shaped by sorrow, tempered by hope. She didn't just sing notes. She sang memory, loss, the possibility of beginning again, even when the world insists it's too late. And when he opened his eyes, it wasn't disbelief on his face. It was something older than language. Recognition. She hadn't saved him. She'd reminded him he still had something left to live for. By the next morning, the hospital wasn't whispering anymore. It was buzzing. Word of the billionaire who woke up after a mysterious street girl sang to him spread like a brush fire through the wards. No one understood it. No charts explained it. But Gregory Solarin was awake. He wasn't talking yet, but he was breathing with purpose. He made eye contact. He responded to stimuli. And most remarkably, he kept looking for the girl, Amara. She hadn't asked for anything in return. No money, no fame. Just one question: can I sing for him again? And so she did. Every morning, every night, she would slip into his room. Like a breeze, sit beside him, hold his hand, and sing. Sometimes he dozed. Other times he stared at her with eyes wide open, as if memorizing every note that fell from her lips. On the third day, his voice returned, rough, broken, but clear. "I don't know who you are," he said, "but your voice, it found me." Amara blinked, tears welling. "You're awake," she whispered. "I'm not dead?" he asked, a weak smile forming. "No, sir. You didn't let me die." His eyes grew heavy again, but not from illness. From something softer. Someone in this world still needs you, she added. And for the first time in years, Gregory Solarin wanted to live. This man, whose money could buy anything but peace, had been touched not by medicine, but music. Not by profit, but purity. And now, behind closed doors, his caregivers and advisors gathered. A lawyer, a doctor, a hospital director. They discussed the girl. She has no ID, no family. "She's been sleeping under a bridge," said the physician. Gregory listened quietly, then said 5 words that would reshape both their fates. Then, "Let her stay here." But fate, like thunder, rarely rolls in alone. That very evening, as Amara slept in a real bed for the first time in years, a woman arrived, dressed loud, eyes sharper than her lipstick. She barged into the hospital demanding to see her niece, Aunt Igioma, the same woman who once left Amara at a graveside without so much as a backward glance. The nurse hesitated, instinctively shielding the child's peace. "She's resting," the nurse said. "We don't allow unscheduled visitors." "I'm her blood," the woman snapped. But Amara, behind the curtain, had already frozen. That voice, that venom, it clawed through her chest. She gripped the blanket like armor, every muscle recoiling from the memory. And then Gregory entered, no longer sunken or silent. He was walking now, breathing deep, stronger, taller. "You say you're her relative?" he asked calmly. "Yes, her aunt." "I've been worried sick," Igioma replied, shifting tone like a chameleon in panic. But Gregory was done with liars. "Where were you the last 2 years?" he asked. "Funny. The girl who saved my life says she was called a witch. Says her family left her to rot. You know how kids lie," Igioma began. "She's lying," Amara said, stepping out. Her voice cut through the hallway like light through fog. "She called me a curse. Said I killed my parents." Igioma's bravado cracked. "We were grieving. You meant every word." Amara replied. Her voice was calm, but forged in steel. "You left me, but he stayed." Gregory looked down at the girl beside him. "You're safe now," he said. And the hospital guards, with quiet dignity, escorted Igioma out. She hissed curses down the hallway, but Amara didn't flinch. She didn't need blood ties. She had found something stronger: belonging. In a world addicted to headlines, it didn't take long before the story exploded beyond the hospital walls. News stations ran it as a miracle. Social media dubbed her the girl who sang life. But in the heart of that whirlwind, Amara remained. Grounded. She didn't care for flashing cameras or whispered awe. All she asked for each day was to see Gregory, to hold his hand, to sing. And as the weeks passed, something remarkable happened. His health didn't just return. His heart did. He started reading again, laughing. He set aside meetings with lawyers, architects, even educators. And then, one quiet morning, as birds chirped beyond the hospital blinds, he asked her, "What do you want to be, Amara?" She blinked. "You mean when I grow up?" He nodded. "Anything in the world." She looked out the window, her voice full of wonder. "I want to fly. Not just sing. I want to be a pilot. I want to see the skies my parents never got to see." Gregory's eyes glistened, not with sadness, but with something electric. "Pride. Then I'll make it happen," he said. And he did. Within days, paperwork was signed. Legal documents. Sealed. Gregory Solarin adopted Amara. The billionaire with a broken heart had found a daughter. The street girl with a tattered voice had found a family. The world watched, stunned. Hashtags trended. Interviews were requested. But Amara kept singing, just not for applause. She moved into Gregory's Banana Island mansion with its marble staircases, endless corridors, and a bedroom that smelled like lavender and promise. Her ceiling was filled with glow-in-the-dark stars, and each night she stared up at them, whispering thank yous to the sky. She enrolled in school, began flight simulations, and even launched a digital platform, Sing to Heal, a virtual space where people dealing with loss, depression, or silence could find comfort in curated music therapy. Everything she'd once needed, she was now offering to the world. But every light casts a shadow. And in a cluttered apartment across town, a man watched the news with clenched fists and narrowing eyes. His name was Sebastian Solarin, Gregory's cousin, a man who had once seen himself as heir to the Solarin empire. And now, in his mind, a beggar girl had snatched it all away. "So the old man gave it to a street rat," he muttered. His assistant, seated quietly beside him, said nothing. "Let's see how long she lasts," Sebastian whispered. And with that, a phone call was made. Quiet, dangerous, the kind of call that didn't end with goodbyes. While Amara danced in sunlit hallways, while Gregory taught her how to steer. Hope like a cockpit, darkness began to sharpen its teeth. Because fairy tales, even the modern kind, have villains who don't wear capes. They wear bloodlines. The house she now called home was filled with light, but evil is a patient shadow. It doesn't rush. It waits. It listens. And then it strikes when you're warmest. It began with a simple plate of jollof rice. One evening, Amara was reading a book about clouds and wind resistance, pilot things Gregory had printed just for her when a maid brought in dinner. Something didn't feel right. The smell was off. Her body tensed. She lifted the spoon halfway, then paused. And that pause may have saved her life. Uncle Ibarami, she called, summoning the family chef. When he entered and took one sniff, his face darkened. "Madam Amara," he said softly, "you no suppose chop this rice. Ye no smell right." The rice was tested. Traces of rat poison. Panic swept through the mansion. Staff were questioned, but the kitchen cameras disabled. The maid who served the food gone, resigned suddenly, vanished. For Amara, something shifted. The warmth of the home started to feel like illusion. She stopped humming in the hallways. She kept her bedroom door locked. And for the first time in months, she didn't sing. Gregory noticed immediately. "You're quieter," he said one evening, sitting beside her on the couch. She looked up, eyes dim. "I think someone's trying to hurt me." He didn't flinch. "I know." Her breath hitched. "You do?" He nodded. "2 anonymous letters. One warned me to return you to the streets. The second said, 'Next time, it won't just be rice.'" Her voice cracked. "Who would do that?" He didn't say the name. But he didn't need to. Sebastian, the cousin, who had disappeared when Gregory fell ill. The same man who hadn't visited once during his coma, but had suddenly begun inquiring about the will. And Gregory was right to worry. Because evil wasn't just whispering now, it was stepping boldly toward the front door. Days later, during a board meeting, Gregory collapsed. His blood pressure spiked. Paramedics rushed him out. Reporters hounded. The gates. Headlines screamed, "Billionaire back in ICU." Amara didn't leave his bedside. She sang. She prayed. But this time, her music felt small, fragile, like it couldn't reach through the fog that surrounded him. And while she waited, in agony, Sebastian struck. A team of lawyers stormed the mansion. They claimed a new will had been signed weeks earlier, transferring all control to Sebastian until Amara turned 21. Business, estate, foundation. It was all his now. The staff resisted. The family doctor protested. But the documents looked real. And suddenly, the girl who had saved a man's life, who had found safety, was now a prisoner in her own home. That night, Sebastian arrived, suitcases in tow, a smirk on his face. "Your daddy's too weak to stop me now," he said, sipping wine in the dining room. "Everything here, it's mine. Until he dies. And then, little girl, you're going back to wherever they scraped you from." Amara stood silently, watching him, but something inside her no longer bent. It began to burn, a fire that remembered every puddle she'd stepped in, every insult she'd swallowed, every night she'd sung herself to sleep on cold concrete. She didn't scream. She planned. The mansion no longer echoed with music. The hallways, once alive with Amara's humming and Gregory's gentle laughter, were now ruled by silence and Sebastian. He stalked the corridors like a lion who believed the kill was already his. Portraits were taken down. Rooms were rearranged. Even the family photo where Amara stood smiling between Gregory and the painted memory of his late wife was removed and hidden away. "This house needs cleansing," Sebastian had sneered. Too much fake energy. But Amara didn't argue. She observed. She remembered what the streets had taught her. Survival is not always loud. Sometimes it's the quietest child in the corner who ends up holding the sharpest truth. Gregory remained in ICU. Machines beeped steadily. But no improvement. Doctors warned Amara. 48 hours without change, and they would prepare for the worst. She sat beside his bed every day, unable to sing. She was scared. What if this time it didn't work? What if she lost him too? At night, she wandered the mansion like a ghost. One evening, she passed the guest wing, now Sebastian's throne room, and heard voices. She paused, listened. "When he dies," Sebastian said on the phone, "everything is mine. The girl, I'll send her back to the gutter she came from. This fortune belongs to me. I've waited too long for some street brat to ruin it." Her blood went cold. The will, the poison, the threats. It all connected, but panic didn't consume her. Strategy did. The next morning, the house stirred early. Staff lined up, confused. A police officer stood in the grand hallway. Beside him, Mr. Okoye, the family's lawyer. In front of them, calm, steady, dressed in white and holding a small black device, stood Amara. "Uncle Sebastian," she called. He turned, wearing fake confusion. "Yes, child." She pressed play. His voice echoed across the marble walls. "When he dies, everything is mine. The girl, I'll send her back." Gasps. The lawyer turned pale. The officer stepped forward. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted poisoning, and forgery." "No, this is a setup," Sebastian shouted, but the handcuffs were already closing. He was dragged out, yelling curses. But Amara didn't flinch. Not anymore. The monster was gone. But one piece of the puzzle remained unfinished. The man who had once whispered, "Your voice found me," was still locked inside his silence. That evening, Amara walked back into the ICU. She sat beside Gregory and took his hand. Her voice trembled, but not from fear. From something deeper, conviction. "You gave me a name when I had none," she sang softly. "You gave me a home when I was cold. Now don't go where I can't follow. There's still laughter here, still skies to fly." Her voice soared, and just like that first time, something moved. His fingers curled. His breathing steadied. Then his eyelids fluttered. "Amara?" He whispered, weak but alive. "You came back," she said through tears. "I never left," he answered. And in that moment, the home they'd built, not of bricks or wealth, but of song and survival, was restored. The media went wild. Miracle twice. Billionaire awakened again by his adopted daughter's song. The man who once lay forgotten by time had returned, and the child who once slept under bridges was now the reason. Gregory Solarin recovered. Faster this time. As if his body, now free of betrayal and lies, remembered how to live. And as soon as he was stable, he called a press conference. The world watched live as he stood, holding Amara's hand. "This young woman," he began, voice strong. Saved my life twice, not with science, not with money, but with faith. And today, I reaffirm what I've said before. She is not just my daughter. She is the future of everything I leave behind. The applause was thunderous, but Amara, she just smiled. She didn't want trophies. She wanted purpose, and she had one now. At just 17, Amara became Nigeria's youngest licensed pilot. She didn't just fly, she soared. And with Gregory's help, she expanded Sing to Heal into a nationwide initiative. Music therapists, mental health specialists. A center that gave hope to children who, like her, had once whispered songs into the dark just to survive the night. But Amara's journey wasn't about spotlight. It was about restoration. She met Dr. Nnamdi Okafor, a gentle-hearted pediatrician who didn't fall in love with the girl on the news, but with the woman who still left soup on the stove for orphan children. They married, had twin boys, Jerry and Joshua. And in the same Banana Island mansion where trauma once echoed in every hallway, joy now danced in every room. Gregory never asked her to leave. "This is your home forever," he would say, "not because I gave it to you, but because you rebuilt it." In time, people forgot the details. The headlines faded. But one thing remained, the voice that sang. Hope into a man's fading heartbeat had become the anthem for thousands. She wasn't just the girl who healed a billionaire. She was the girl who turned pain into purpose, who took rejection and used it as runway fuel, who reminded us all that sometimes the most powerful people aren't the ones in suits or palaces, but the barefoot child who dares to speak light into darkness. Sometimes life gives you a microphone when you've only ever known silence. Use it, not for noise, but for healing. Because you never know who's listening or who's about to live again because you dared to sing.